Chapter 15. One important rule that comes in handy and holds true in most places except for when it doesn't, of course, was the first law of motion. It was simplicity in its truest form, really. To summarize, an object will maintain a stable velocity unless acted upon by an outside source. Very simple, right? Pity I totally forgot to warn Rainbow Dash that her usual outside sources of gravity and air friction were pretty much non-existent here. We smashed into another chunk of rock, barely managing to avoid the massive beam of charged, superheated particles as it put a rather impressive hole through the rock next to us. My barrier staved off the heat, but I could still feel the tingling sensation, as if too much static electricity had built up. Not possible in a vacuum if I recall correctly, but it was better than imagining the beam microwaving the outer layer of skin cells off me. Trying to look on the bright side, I assured myself that it was a good thing this wasn't a military ship. Rainbow learned very quickly, bless her heart. She booked it rapidly across the surface, turning much faster once she realized she had to counter thrust against her own velocity to slow down. She did an amazingly graceful swerving pattern to avoid the big shots. I kept my eyes closed, of course. One, to not wet myself by seeing how close we came to becoming a pile of ionized ash, and two, to keep my focus on deflecting the small arms of fire of the mechanical soldiers that were following us. Thankfully, their aim was traditionally crappy. The Grosh didn't colonize well, so their soldiers consisted largely of mechanical infantry. The problem was what they breathed. They called it ichion gas in Universal Common. It was a combination of dense hydrogen, a few neurological stimulants, and a fascinatingly large concentration of tiny parasites that infested the Grosh's lungs. They processed the hydrogen for each individual Grosh, somehow turning it into a concentrated oxygen mixture, and were native to their original biosphere. It was a creative process, as the Grosh's bodies in turn processed only the heightened oxygen levels. We didn't fully understand the process, but then again we weren't exactly given much time to research them. Regardless, the drawback was that the parasites had a shelf life to almost nil, and nitrogen was poisonous to them. Oops. It slowed down the whole terraforming thing when you had to convert the entire atmosphere to a different gas, introduce several biologically dependent plant species en masse, and then saturate the planet with a parasite before you could live on it. That also meant their ships had to haul around a full eco-deck just to sustain their life support systems. It made personal spacesuits a bit complicated, I'd assumed. Yeah, robots were just easier. Rainbow followed the purple line coming for her chest as fast as she possibly could. The closer we got to the glowing barrier ahead of us, the more of my old energy pool I could tap into. My eyes opened again once we got within 30 meters or so. They widened to full as I took in the sight. Across our dirty, charred expanse of rock was a partially collapsed but perfectly functioning aegis barrier. More specifically, my aegis barrier. Our strongest barrier magic, the aegis formed an absolute field that blocked everything and closed in on itself. The downsides were that it kind of stopped air too, which wouldn't let attacks out of it from the inside. Its use was really situational at best. Of course, a charged particle blast fired from an orbital battleship was a pretty nasty threat. The weak atmosphere danced with reflected ion bolt energy as Rainbow broke into a no-holds-barred line for the rubble. My focus shifted from the now missing shots to keying us into the resonation of the barrier. Her speed almost caused us to pancake into the side of it before I managed to sink us. We passed through the field and she immediately spun, boosting hard in the other direction, while we still smashed into the inside of the barrier across from our entry point, but at least she braked. A few lacerations and bruises were better than a caved-in skull, I supposed. We collapsed into a panting, breathless pile at the bottom of the barrier wall, and I reflexively checked our oxygen supply again. We had about 25 minutes of air left, I estimated. Plenty. I hoped. Rainbow shakily stood again after a few moments and looked around. I stared apprehensively at the walls until I saw one of the large charged particles skip off. Whew, it was indeed perfectly functioning. The massive, impossibly large moving wall of metal stopped firing after a few deflected shots raised some of their now useless robotic infantry. They couldn't do much to us in here, and I decided the new plan was to simply chill out until Twat finished charging her teleportation magic. Heroic, I know. Rainbow was momentarily fascinated by the gently flowing field of lights and symbols surrounding us, and smiled softly as she took it in. I had to give her credit. She was taking having been shot at with an anti-cruiser weapon amazingly well. She seemed to draw on the sidesway with amazement, like it was a massive amusement park or something. The energy that danced behind her amethyst eyes made me smile. "That was actually kind of fun, but we should probably stay in here," Rainbow suggested, smirking back at me finally. Should I ask, or will only cause me to die of worry and guilt?" Twilight asked, speaking for the first time since the barrage of apologies after we started screaming in panic. Getting shot at brings out the best in me, I had to admit. Rainbow snickered and shook her head to no pony in particular. She remembered with a start a few seconds later and added hastily, "No, you probably shouldn't ask." I watched the massive ship slowly start to turn, lining up one of the main cargo bays with our trajectory. Twilight? How much time's left on those 3 teleports?" I asked nervously. "This isn't a little jaunt across town, you know. I'm almost done with Rainbow's charge, and then I'll do yours and your twins. 12 and a half minutes?" she estimated. Rainbow suddenly went rigid under me and inhaled sharply. Had she noticed the ship? Turning my head back, I realized she was looking into the center of our barrier instead. The whole thing was barely 10 meters across, and a small figure rested in the center that I had previously overlooked. It was extremely tiny now, and cratered partially into the rocks. My mind started to ache, and I involuntarily winced as a sharp stab went through it. The figure was me. Oh, that's not... I think I'm gonna be sick," Rainbow muttered, looking away from my other self rapidly. It was easy enough to see the source of her discomfort. My old body was actually smaller than my new one, I realized. For one, I was a runt, really. 2, my wrist was actually on the small size, barely reaching 4 foot, if I recalled. Lastly, my other form was severely emaciated, almost a skeleton. The light blue patchy fur that was covering parts of its skin was falling out, and I saw that the tips of the foot-long ears were withered and drying badly. Oh, and it was in 3 pieces. That was important too, I think. Not that it really mattered at this point, as the prior starvation and dehydration would have made my survival iffy at best. I could see the organs and blood, frozen in time a week back. Still somehow alive as the rainbow energy threads wove through it all, but there was no helping it anymore. "Scratch that third teleport, Twilight," I whispered quietly, my voice surprising me by catching on her name. I took a moment to close my eyes and compose myself, feeling about to turn away from the slowly dying alien body. There was a light, squeaking whimper followed by a sigh in a different voice. "You found your other self?" Twilight asked in a weak but understanding voice. "Oh dear," Rarity mumbled quietly, followed by a low growl from Applejack. "Are you really just gonna give up? We should try to heal him up anyway," she argued. Rainbow let out gentle breaths, shivering under me now. I surprised myself by frowning and gently nuzzling her muzzle along her neck. A hug kinda didn't work with broken forelegs. She started momentarily before sighing and bending her neck against my head, resting there. "It's kinda a little late for healing. I don't think even magic could repair that," she muttered after recovering for a few moments. I found myself oddly numb, however. I realized that if I searched my memories, I'd seen worse. It was different when it was myself, though. "Rainbow, are you alright?" Applejack asked a few moments later, irritation gone from her voice and much quieter. I distracted myself by peeking around the barrier. Up close, I saw it was a lot more deteriorated than I thought. Thankfully, it was strong magic. I watched the foreign mechanical monsters gather on the edges of the barrier. Then I thought about it more. How had I lived without air this long? "Yeah, I mean, no sweat, right? He's just a bit worse off than I had anticipated," she excused, waving her hoof to no pony again. She wasn't used to this whole long-distance communication thing, it seemed. I found the tube shortly thereafter. It was pumping a healthy supply of oxygen in through a deteriorated part of the barrier. They were intentionally keeping me alive then. That entire side of the barrier was lined with scanning equipment as well, now that I looked closer. They knew how the aegis barrier functioned, so they definitely weren't scanning that. That meant... There was a weak, whimpering noise. I'm worried about Bender's legs. He needs medical attention, Fluttershy reminded. They had gone mostly numb at this point. It was a blessing, really. He'll get it right away upon the teleport. Don't worry, Fluttershy, Rarity assured. I stared up at the massive ship above us. It had given up firing upon us. Now I knew why. They didn't want it to blow up their research. The transmitters on the scanning system attached to the aegis were easy enough to see as well. A sinking chill crept into me as I realized it wasn't going to be as easy as this. Rainbow? Are you up for one more flight? I asked quietly, losing my strength of voice. They had the data on the ship already. I needed to buy some time. She glanced back at me questioningly, but then followed my gaze up towards the massive research ship. On top of it, towards the front, there was a large array of angular pyramid-like transmitters and receivers. They're learning about the link, aren't they? Twilight asked, sounding uneasy. The scanner's still running, so they're not done yet. They'd keep the data on the ship until they have it all, but I don't know how much they have, I reasoned. Did they have enough to be a threat? There's literally no way of knowing from here. Several micro-drones, about a half-meter in diameter, landed on the outside of the barrier a second later. Rainbow Dash jumped at the loud impact noises and looked back and forth between them. I counted about 5 as they started trying to pull at the weakened segments of the shield. My eyes softened as I realized it didn't matter. They had data on Equestria in all likelihood. The uneasy silence was broken by my sigh, as I explained. We need to find a way to take out their transmitters, Dash. There's those angular things sticking out of the front on the top. That would buy us time to figure out how much data they had anyway, I hoped. The radiation they vented during FTL transmission meant they had to be outside of the ship. That definitely worked to our advantage. Dash surprised me by smiling, however. Hit and run, she asked, widening her stance and lowering herself. Coiling her leg muscle in what looked like anticipation. The soldier in me that I denied for so long grunted his approval, and I smirked. She's made of a lot sterner stuff than I'd given her credit for. One pass is all we need, then back it to here, I added, simple and efficient. Dash nodded briskly, eyes narrowing as she locked them onto the array. You're kidding, right? You need medical attention. You two are going to go off on some crazy flight? Applejack questioned incredulously. Part of me realized she was right. Rainbow gave an angry snort, however. There's no way I'm letting these jerks anywhere near Equestria. They won't even see us coming, she boasted and almost felt her coat bristle up under me. If they'd seen her now, I don't think my soldier buddies would have found a single bad thing to say, I realized. Rainbow Man included, of course. I considered my goal, however. There are several reinforced carbon struts that connected the array to the ship. I was unfortunately a support caster, or I could have just blown the crap out of it from where we stood. They probably realized I wasn't an attack class already. But there was one technique I could do that was offensive, just one. Remember that it's got wider in direct proportion to the length of the blade of energy extending off the left side of my mouth. Shields were basically just a plane of force. Smash one to a few nanometers thick and ionize the end, and it becomes a pretty nice blade as well. It was my last line of defense, all else failing. I don't remember ever using it apart from training, but that didn't surprise me much. For one, blades were a little outclassed in that war. For two, I didn't remember a huge amount still. I didn't have access to my other self's memories, which was a little depressing. I'd been secretly hoping I'd recover them when I came here, I supposed. This'll cut through it like butter, I mouthed through the block of energy between my teeth. Rainbow started to giggle, but nodded. You got it, partner. One hit and run coming right up, she affirmed, grinning again before turning her back towards the giant research ship. Be careful, you two, Twilight asked, giving in. She knew this had to be done. What I didn't mention was that somehow we had to get rid of the ship too, after we knocked out the communication. My mind started racing through diagrams as I tried to desperately remember my training. There had to be something on the ship, some weakness we could exploit. It wasn't a military class vessel. Piece of cake. Relax, Twilight, Rainbow assured. It wouldn't be, but I think she already knew that. I nutted against Rainbow, leaning down tightly to her, letting the blade drift from my mouth. I advised, they have a minimum firing range. Rainbow grinned openly now. So fly down their throat. Got it. Give my wings a boost, she requested. Be careful, Rainbow. You need to get your pretty little rainbow flying back one piece, you hear? Alphadak warned. Dash blushed slightly, and I tried not to sprinkle what I knew she heard that as. Yeah, you don't want to miss the amazing party, Dashy, Pinkie Pie tacked on. Okay, I snickered at that. Okay, then let's knock him down a peg, Dashy. I spoke up directly into her ear. Her nickname was adorable, I had to admit. She shot a glare back at me, but I just smiled innocently at her, earning an eye roll. Don't try dumping the cute with me. I'm not Twilight or Fluttershy, she muttered sarcastically, but smirking out contrary to her tough act. What? Fluttershy stammered out. We never got a chance to reply, though. The charge had finished, and I dumped it into Rainbow's wing thrusters. They expanded almost 3 times, planes of light extending off her wings, over doubling their normal size. She got a look of exhilaration and turned back to the ship again. Hit him hard and fast, Rainbow, I affirmed, catching the blade in my mouth again, holding it out firmly before dumping the rain of my energy into it. The blade exploded in light, expanding almost 3 meters in length, putting the tip to one of the weak spots in the shield. I secretly was delighted as I saw one of the mechanical microdrones fall in half as the point of the blade extended through it. Rainbow Dash dropped low and sprung like a rubber band straight up, an explosion of thrusters lighting up the air around us as we phased through the top of the shield. If Rainbow Dash didn't have my respect for her, she sure as hell did now. We banged hard as she counter-thrust through a laser field, barely slipping through between 2 shots. They had opened up with everything the second we cleared the gravity field. Dash kept her flight pattern tight and varied, spinning in a tight roll as she blasted out of the thrust, dodging the entire attack field with ease. Her wings of light scorched the darkness of space as she danced towards our target. Best flyer in Equestria? Yeah, right. She was a goddess of flight. We came out of our tight spin as she corrected our velocity and burst under their firing pattern. A few smaller anti-fighter rays grazed us, but were deflected harmlessly by my angled shields. It had to be done. I released the limits of my magic pool once more, this time with all of my other self's energy, causing Rainbow's wings to explode into light again as she shot past the range minimum in an instant. She let out a roaring battle scream as we swung in along the hull of the ship, hugging its shield line. 3 flaps were all it took. 100 meters she covered as if it was nothing, lining up the support stretch with measured precision. I gritted my teeth hard into the blade grip, letting out a growl around it. The blade flared up and we made contact just as they tried to raise their shields up around the array. Rainbow ducked and I swung. I barely felt the wedge that was my deflective shield smash through the severed line. I made through theirs. We passed the array an instant later. Rainbow flicked her back legs around, propelling a hard U-turn along the shield of the ship. Exhausted, I let the blade dissipate as I felt the dull ache along the back of my head from overexertion. The rest of my body soon joined the skull ache as Rainbow slammed the thrusters against her own velocity, momentarily almost doubling the G-forces on us. Admittedly, her body was probably used to it. I gritted my teeth as pain exploded through my forelegs. A sharp mineral taste entered my mouth shortly afterwards. Either I bit my tongue, had massive internal bleeding, or was a nerve overload sensation. Most likely it was option 3. Rainbow didn't notice, however. She was now too busy grinning. The field around the array collapsed as fast as it had popped up. I saw the white-hot line going through the struts and gave a sigh of relief. Dash burst forward and kicked the side of the array a second later, dislodging the entire thing and sending it drifting off into space. We were too close to their hold to target now, and she took the time to do a victory pose. At least research ships didn't have mobile attack drones. Ha! We totally took him down! That was awesome! She declared, sounding beyond proud of herself. Quickly, I glanced back at our bubble and swallowed as I saw one of the microdrones almost inside. I didn't know if I could go back to the portal to the other direction or not, but finding out wasn't on my to-do list. Crap, now I was starting to think like Twilight. Rainbow, the portal. A drone. I managed to mutter through the demolition sequence going off in my skull. Ah, horse apples. I'm gonna kick the head out of those stupid metal beach balls, she growled, giving a hard flap of wings and bursting off the whole shield surface. Much to my dismay, her path was taking a straight line. I once and smashed my jaw shut as the acceleration, but managed to shout, "The beams dash!" She gasped, remembering an instant later. We dove into evasion action instantly just as a full array of 5 beams scorched through the spot we were half a second ago. My scream was drowned out in the high-pitched wail of the laser energy that burned through our air bubble hard enough to generate sound. By instinct, I ejected the outer layer of our deflection shield as it was heated to the point of combusting. Rainbow dove into a rough spiral, gritting her teeth as the perspiration turned to steam off of her forehead before dispersing into space. My mind reeled as I felt her make several more dodges and another wave of the large laser shot past us, missing entirely this time. I felt the anti-fighter shots power up in my detection range and struggled to anchor my mind enough to move the deflect shields into interception precision. "Rainbow! Mender!" I heard Twilight shout, feeling like the echo bounced on inside my skull a few times. "No, you don't, you little monsters!" I heard Applejack suddenly shout as well. It was hard to see with my vision swimming, but I swore I saw red objects suddenly exiting the portal at high velocity. The first drone that got through the barrier caught the thing right in the sensor panel. To my amazement, it cracked through the casing and sent the drone hurtling backwards into the side of the barrier. The second drone seemed to panic, managing to block the second red orb with a utility arm, but the velocity tore the arm off and spun the drone around. The third projectile scored a direct hit on the power pack in the back. The coupling must have snapped and the entire drone lit up like a light bulb momentarily before giving off weak wisps of smoke and drifting off motionlessly. All other attention was cut short as the anti-fighter turrets fired. Rainbow went into a dodging pattern, slowing noticeably as her wings started to lose power. No! I tried to direct power into both wings and the shield at the same time, my mind falling into the proverbial acid pit to manage it. One parry. Rainbow spun, dodging 2 more of the shots. Another parry. She felt her wings flare up again and made a mad dash for the shield, taking advantage of the larger weapon's firing delay. The third parry. Deflection barrier 1 of 3 collapsed. They led us in as we shifted to a straight line, and I threw the healthiest barrier into the path of the Rainbow's head. Parry 4 and 5 skipped off it, narrowly avoiding removing her head as she flew. 4 meters from the shield. The lead fire fell behind it, and Rainbow tugged into a roll to brace for impact. I shifted the healthy shield in between the barrier and us, using its energy to slow our velocity. We rotated, coming in hard and fast. A glancing blow, barely deflected, skipped off the weakened third shield, reducing it to critical. 2 meters. Things slowed as I felt my heart smashing against my ribs. Our velocity dropped, but so did our angle, bringing us back into line with the 3 prior missing shots. I barely managed to move Shield 3 into position, shifting to the now lined up laser fire away from us using redirection. The shield flickered and I saw a burn line lace across Rainbow's right shoulder, an inch from my face. Startled, I missed the final deflection. The angle was bad. I saw my mistake instantly, but it was too late. The shield took the full force of the shot, having to absorb it rather than deflect. Naturally, the shield shattered, letting ribbons of energy through. The impact knocked the air out of me as I felt a split-second lance of burning pain and then nothing at all, as bits of feeling disappeared from the lower left side of my back. We went through the barrier and cratered into the rock next to the portal. There was a momentary lapse in awareness. It felt like a long blink, and then lost a bit of time during it. I lost consciousness. Rainbow let out a low groan as she shakily stood up. I contented myself to silence as I rested limply on her back. There was almost no magic left in either of my bodies now. I did a passive scan on my systems, running on power saving mode as best I could. Torn muscles in both forelegs. They were effectively useless. Abrasions covered my skin as well, but that was expected. The real damage was done to my back. I had 3 reasonably deep burned gashes in my back, above my left hip by a few inches. The air barrier I made sealed it, but the top one was bleeding badly. With nowhere to go, the blood just pooled and spread out under the barrier along my coat. I felt lightheaded, but decided it was probably due to overexertion of magic and my headache. I tried exercising as much pressure against it as I could using the barrier that was left from before, but my throbbing head made that hard. We were back inside the barrier, with bits of mechanical parts lying about. There was just enough gravity to keep them anchored and allow Rainbow to stand. Chunks of apples drifted slowly along the surface of the rock too, I noticed. The barrier looked ragged, but had self-repaired to some extent. The mechanical soldiers stood outside of cell, apparently having given up their infiltration for now. I caught a glimpse of the giant ship rotating slowly above us. All I noticed was the massive rear-faced cargo bay. That explained why they weren't trying to get inside. There was somebody going to swallow the rock whole. Ouch! That stung a bit. Mission successful, though, Rainbow Dash announced, rubbing her singed shoulder absently. Oh, thanks, Celestia, you're alright. You took out the communication device, then? Todd asked, exhaling in relief. I decided to keep my mouth shut and put more pressure on the wound, feeling the barrier get a little slick. It was hard to think through the cloud in my mind. Rainbow nodded pointlessly and added, Yep, kicked it off into space. They nicked my shoulder, but other than that, we were untouchable. So you saved Equestria? That's awesome, Rainbow! How's Mender? Fluttershy asked quietly, which sounded odd in an enthusiastic tone. Rainbow smirked. Well, I am kinda awesome like that, and he seems fine. His bears were amazing out there, she added. I was vaguely surprised she gave up some of the credit. Then why aren't you talking? Applejack asked, sounding a little irritated for some reason. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Just tired. Cool apple attack, I managed to mutter, watching one of the red, tasty-looking snacks roll and twist across the barack near us. Wait, no, it wasn't moving. I think my eyes were instead. Rainbow frowned and twisted around to look back at me. Well, I thank you kindly. I simply agree with that. No metal monster will set hoof in Equestria as long as I have something to say about it, the farm mare declared, followed by a unique sound of a hoof impact probably against her chest. And I helped load the apples! Pinky followed up in delight. Rainbow got a look of mild concern, however. Uh-oh. Why is your nose bleeding, Mender? She inquired a moment later. She couldn't see my back. Oh, he overexerted his magic. I got a little nosebleed that night after the Ursa Minor incident, too, Todd answered for me. Wait, the constellation? I momentarily entertained an image of her fighting off the stars themselves and getting a little nosebleed from the ordeal. Damn, she could have done all this without batting an eyelash, I bet. My ego momentarily felt worse than my body. Regardless, Rainbow's teleport is ready and Mender's is about halfway charged. I'll wait and pull you both out at once, Twat went on to inform. Rainbow was watching the giant ship now as well, as we started to pull closer to it in a massive beam of murky green light. What's it doing? She asked hesitantly. Pulling us in. Trying to trap us. I managed getting tired suddenly. It was getting harder to keep my breath. Twilight snorted. I'll just teleport you out in a few minutes and we can be done with this nightmare. Rainbow can go now, I whispered, wishing she'd used the escape route available to her. No way! I'm sticking with you until the end, partner. Rainbow refused, smirking back at me again. I groaned and shook my head. Stubborn mare. You don't need to, I protested tiredly. You're worth the element of loyalty, remember? Applejack spoke up, chuckling after. Remember, I started to non-agreement when we were jolted forward slightly to the sound of a loud crash. Whoa! She protested, bracing against the rocking motion. I looked forward and saw them backing up our floating rock and raising us a little more, using the spatial manipulation field. Idiots. The bottom of our floating, I must have smashed into the bottom of the docking bay. They never were too accurate with those. The artificial gravity took over inside of the ship, and I winced as I was pushed down onto Rainbow. My forelegs were on fire with pain, and I was trying to sadly recover feeling in my back now. The wound, or more accurately, the nerves around the damaged areas, began to scream out under the newly discovered pressure. I hadn't been expecting this reaction and fought back a wave of nausea and lightheaded vertigo. I felt the warm liquid running down my flanks now and swallowed. Not good. Some kind of big roam. You could hurry that teleport a bit, Twilight. Rainbow continued speaking. My hearing fully recovered after a few more seconds, and I shivered, feeling myself get colder. Not good at all. At this rate, I'd die from blood loss. Trying something new, I let most of the only remaining barrier mostly dissipate until it was only the size of a walnut or so. I then gritted my teeth and carefully plugged it into the only hole that wasn't cauterized. My mind exploded into agony. I almost bit my tongue trying to keep from screaming as I roared out the new spinning room. Son of a bitch, I was not cut out for this kind of thing. I almost had the concept of getting a tattoo, for crying out loud. I'm trying, Dash. Just keep yourself and Mender safe. 5 minutes, tops, Twi assured, sounding a bit frantic. Rainbow sighed and paced slightly, trying to desperately look at anything other than my other self in the center of the rock. It wasn't that hard, as the hangar gave us an ample amounts of curiosities to look at. It was massive, for one. I knew it was almost a kilometer long and half that or so in width. In theory, it was the dry dock for experimental ships. In reality, they used it to store essentially anything they found interesting enough to study. Us, in this case. Lights shone down from high above, illuminating the docks in a murky green light. It wasn't enough to light the place to satisfaction, really. Dark labs were in rows to the sides of the docks, and sinister robots followed us with their sensors through the glass windows. Other ships were also landed. The cool glue pulse of their hover disks simply added to the ambience. This place is kinda cool, my sand partner noted, looking about with curiosity now. Greetings, last known member of species 5387. Welcome to my ship, suddenly boomed from unseen speakers above. Rainbow let out a yelp, diving to the rock for protection while looking around. A massive panel opened in the wall next to us, and we slowed to a stop. The holographic projector hummed as it powered up, the face of my nightmares coming onto the screen. His hideous visage was twisted and warped, and the sickly white fur turned up around the corners of his mouth. A sinister grin bestowed on his features. The two sharper-looking teeth dropped on menacingly, and half of his scarred face was replaced by gleaming metal. The two longer ears were stretched out far behind his head like some mockery of hair. I shuddered and tried not to convulse. Rainbow stared blankly at the face as I was shocked at her stoic behavior. To show such calm in front of one of them! Oh, gosh. The deadpan expression soon gave way into a massive fit of laughter. I was shocked, jaw dropped as I watched her roar with glee until tears came from her eyes. The Grosh looked utterly shocked, then annoyed, and finally downright irritated. The big bad oogly wooglies are fluffy bunnies with cheese graters stuck to their faces. Really? She managed to gasp out between chortles. She started stomping rapidly on the rock in ecstatic laughter. Enough of this! I can destroy you both whenever I want, so silence! The Grosh screamed. I blinked at Dash, who was still giggling, and looked back at the view screen. Yeah, it did kind of look like a bunny from their world. Oh damn, that totally ruined it for me. Now I couldn't not see it. Dash finally recovered enough to snort. Wow, some ponies grumpy. Remind me to feed Angel a nice big carrot when we get home, Fluttershy. Bunnies apparently get really cranky, she requested. There was no response. She blinked after a few more seconds and looked around. Fluttershy? Twilight? She called out hesitantly. Nothing. I sighed as I realized the magic had given way. Her spell wore off, Dash. It must have been strained going through the portal. Less duration, I muttered, trying to head off the panic. Oh, the spell wore off. Pity. Looks like you won't be getting a rescue, the Grosh taunted, looking amused. I shook my head. The teleport's still charging, I assured her, still able to see the energy build up. She nodded and grinned. You don't scare us. We're gonna get out of here, no sweat, she bragged. Go ahead. We're still hooked on to him. Really, show us how the transfer works by taking him back, then enjoy your last days, the Grosh offered gleefully. Oh, crap. Rainbow narrowed her eyes, but I shook my head. They still have data on the ship. Only slowed him down, I muttered, shivering again. What? We didn't say... She started to question, looking worried. The Grosh started laughing. Of course not. You just inconvenienced us. It'll take a couple of hours to fix the transmitter array. Rainbow, go back, please, I requested, feeling dizzy again. No way! I'm not leaving you here alone, she refused. More laughter from above. Oh, it's touching. You know, I could save you, right? All you have to do is help us get the research done. You can live and become a Grosh commander. Think about it. This deal wasn't even offered to your traitor allies, the screen offered. Rainbow snorted and backed away from the screen with me. He can live without your help, she shouted, looking irate now. I wouldn't accept anyway, I managed to whisper, getting more tired by the minute. Yeah, definitely blood loss. Rainbow didn't answer, getting a unquestioning look in her eyes. I wondered what was wrong until she looked back at her left flank. You better not have peed on. She started to warn before freezing in place. I followed her line of sight to the blood now running down her flank. Oh no, no, please no, she muttered, yanking the cord on her chest. Oops. I felt the harness release and slid gently down her back. She waited until I was completely off before turning around again, ignoring the blood coating her thighs and running down her back legs. I winced at the pain of the bump against our rock, but then tried my hardest to smile up at her. I felt weak, and she just shook her head. There was a light chuckle from above, which she ignored. No, please, Mender, why didn't you say something? She went out, shifting behind me, trying to put pressure on the wound. What would you have done? I asked skeptically, resting my head against the rocks. I felt so tired. A little nap sounded good about now. Rainbow tied the harness strap over the wound, tightening it as hard as she could. You stupid stallion! Why? I would have brought you to Taunts. She has healing magic! She shouted, sounding more and more angry. My offer still stands, the Grosh reminded, snickering merrily. No. And this wouldn't do it all. A nap would be easy. Is that how I wanted to be remembered? I pushed my head into the floor and shifted my legs under me, wincing at the burning agony crawling up my spine. It didn't matter though, as I slowly shifted to my haunches, looking up at the Grosh. Ender, please stay down, Rainbow asked, trying to nudge me over. The anger was gone from her voice again, and I saw her eyes starting to get watery. Turning my head to look at her, I managed a warm smile. I'm sorry for being stupid, Rainbow, I apologized. A tear slipped out of her left eye and she shook her head rapidly. We can still get you to Twilight. Don't you dare give up, she warned, trying to smile. I flooded the entire hold with ichion gas. If you exit your bubble, you die anyway, so don't try anything, worms, the Grosh warned. Wait, gas? Oh yeah, it was toxic and absurdly deadly to us, probably the ponies too. What was it again? It was something important. Everything snapped into place, and I suddenly smiled. It made sense now. It was all karma. I threw my life away before in a pointless attempt to save a few. I didn't want to die, and I had failed. Our species was lost, and I was all that was left. I should have gone with them, but I didn't. I was given another chance. Why? To get my wish. My real, true wish. It was the reason I joined the Guard in the first place, to make a difference, to fix what was wrong and lacking justice. I had lost sight of that alongside my memories, but it was part of who I am still. To mend. Both physical, emotional, and justice itself. My memories might never fully return, but I found myself at peace. I didn't need them. I had another chance. Can you tell everyone that I'm sorry? I asked Rainbow quietly, slumping against her left shoulder. Everything in me quieted as she went rigid against me. Mender, you need to tell them yourself. This isn't... I'm not going to... She started to protest. Oddly, I felt a sense of calm finally. The ship still holds Equestria's secrets, and the others need you, I muttered, fighting to stay awake. What can you do against this huge ship? I'm staying with you until Twilight teleports us, she insisted once more. I sighed, and the Grosh started laughing behind me. How cute! But you can't do anything! We have your bio. You focus on support and barrier magic. You only attack as that silly blade and you're in the middle of a hangar filled with lethal gas. Really, entertain me with your pathetic plan, he taunted. I ignored him entirely. Then, I apologized to you as well. If nothing else, Applejack needs you. I spoke quietly, a lump forming in my throat. It was taking all of my energy just to talk, and I felt my eyes getting wet. No, Mender, Rainbow muttered. I shook my head before she could say more. Please, confess to her. For me, alright? Be happy, I requested from the bottom of my heart. It wasn't fair that I had to come so close to happiness she could still have, only for this to happen. I wanted to hear them one last time, if nothing else. Rainbow backed her head back, shaking it rapidly. I didn't care if she saw me crying. She was as well. Stop it! You need to... She almost pleaded. I'm sorry, Dashi. You're a goddess of flight if that means anything, I complimented, smiling weakly at her. She swallowed and opened her mouth to say something, but I shook my head. Goodbye, partner, I spoke, before gently pushing the polarities of Twilight's teleport spell together with my magic. Rainbow's eyes went wide as she felt the spell activate on her back. Meds! She started to shout, before vanishing in a flash of light. Meant. Indeed. That's what I'd do. With nothing left to support me, I fell to where she was, collapsing to a heap on the rocks. The spot where she'd been sitting was warm. I couldn't hold back anymore and just let the tears come. They slid down my cheeks and mixed with the slow expanding smear of blood under me. Fluttershy, Twilight, I wished I could talk to them again. All of those wonderful ponies. It wasn't fair! Well, that was noble. Bravo, good sir, the Grosh complimented snidely, sounding amused. I said nothing but just lay there, wishing he'd die. Well, he would die in a few minutes. Of that I could promise. But now that she's gone, you can make the choice guilt-free. Help us recreate the portal and finish the research, and I will make you the head of our R&D department. You can even hunt down those cowards you allied yourself with. You will live forever and get anything you so desire, he offered. I rotated my head enough to glare skeptically at him. Was he truly trying to offer me that? I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response as I sponged up the last few dribbles of magic inside of me. He hesitated and then sighed. All right, I'll add to it. We have DNA from your species. Your record stated that you didn't get on the breeding list, so wouldn't having all the subservient females you want now be nice? I'll clone dozens just for you, he tacked on. Amazingly enough, I discovered the new level of hatred for the Grosh. It surprised me because I didn't realize that I could want some pony dead so badly that I thought just killing them might not be satisfying enough. With no answer, he twitched significantly. Fine! When we invade, I'll round up all your little friends and give them to you as well. How's that sound? He asked eagerly. My eyes widened a little. Fluttershy and Twilight. I could see them again, but they would hate me. It would destroy everything they loved for my own desires. My eyes softened and the tears came again. I wasn't willing to become a monster, was I? This offer was what every individual would normally strive for, though, wasn't it? Such power and control, and everyone I cared about protected, all achieved in an instant with little to no effort. But it would sacrifice every pony else in Equestria to achieve it. That wasn't acceptable. Oh, I see you're interested now, the Grosh muttered, followed by, You're sweet on one of them, aren't you? Two, actually. Not that he needed to know that. It was a cold, sinking sensation that matched well with my falling body. What I truly wished for way back then. I rotated my head enough to see my old self slumbering, dreaming of the end of the world. Well, it was the end for him. He died with his species, didn't he? He failed and wasn't able to protect anyone, and he paid for the failure with death. He failed so badly that he almost doomed another universe to the same fate with his selfish desire to not die. But I had another chance, didn't I? To protect. To fix what I almost destroyed. To mend. I was able to finally make a difference. Then it occurred to me. His offer was massive. Which could only mean one thing. You really have almost nothing, don't you? I asked quietly, smirking. He froze and then slowly shifted to a scowl. No. We have about 30% of the information scanned. But it looks like your final results will require your species' magic, aggravating as it is, he finally admitted. If this ship disappeared, all of the data would go with it, I realized. This wasn't a Grosh project, this was this Grosh's project. He hadn't reported it due to greed and having next to nothing then. I smiled openly and couldn't help but chuckle. He glared irritably at me, but I interrupted with, You were wrong earlier, by the way. Oh? Pray tell, he requested, sounding angry now. I have one more spell. It's rather simple and only has a few purposes, so it wouldn't be on my bio, I informed, smiling pleasantly up at him from my laying position. My mind tested the stone I resided in, but it was too hard to manipulate with what little left I had left of me. Oh, I know. He scoffed and rolled his eyes. And I assume you believe this spell to be powerful enough to bring down this entire ship. Please, be reasonable now. I doubt you want to die, he reasoned. I couldn't help but laugh. Destroy the ship? Of course it can't. I'm not crazy. I added in a rasp after my laughter degraded into a dry coughing fit. I continued, regardless of his now amused expression. And of course, I don't want to die. But if it's asked of me to protect those I care about, even if they'll never know, then I don't have a choice, do I? Besides, I admit a certain satisfaction to taking you down with me. He outright laughed. You are so entertaining. Now I await this display of magic eagerly, he added, smirking at me. I saw medical drones lining up outside of my shield. He probably presumed to collect me after I passed out. Pity to disappoint. You won't be impressed, as this was only ever used to heat soup and light pilot lights, I warned, deciding upon the closest soft object. My left hoof shook slightly as the creation symbol was carved into it instead of the rock. It felt nothing, thankfully. Channeling all the energy I had left, I ignited a small flame in my hoof. Legrash watched skeptically. A lighter? Really? He questioned. Mender, I'm coming, was suddenly whispered into my head in Twilight's voice. My heart fluttered and I smiled softly. A small miracle for my last wish. I sent silent thanks to whom or whatever granted it. Her image appeared in my mind, horns screwing up with perspective as it seemed to stretch out towards me. The charge on my back sped up significantly, but it was too slow. Too late. The entrance was a kilometer-wide square, 2.5 kilometers back at least meant. You Grosh are kinda slow. Did you know that you've surrounded me with roughly 250,000 cubic meters of ichneumon gas? The stimulants in it are flammable. The oxygen in the parasites mixed with the hydrogen in the base is even more so. I calculated that to be roughly 6 times the yield I'd need to reduce the ship and the surrounding space to a very fine dust. I spelled out, smiling as I killed the part of the aegis bear and watched it slowly start to fade. The Grosh panicked. Venthold! He screamed, hitting buttons rapidly. Way too late for that. Now I knew why they didn't let their research ships go on the front lines. Our primitive heat-based culture would, with our solid fuels, would have gotten an endless joy of popping them like balloons. I turned my head back to the image of Twilight as the barrier started to flicker. I'm sorry, Twilight. I wish I could have stayed in Equestria forever. I apologized, trying to nuzzle her image as her eyes widened. She could hear me? No, please, no, Mender! Hold on, I'm almost... She started to shout. I looked up at the shields that flared up once more, and then faded. The docking doors hadn't even cleared their unlocking segment, as predicted. It was too late. The gas rushed in to mingle with my oxygen, and I watched the flame on my hoof start to flare up as embers drifted into the air. The parasites had gotten to the fire first and were now regretting their decision, it seemed. No stopping it now. The spread was fast. The flame seemed to coil like a snake. Twilight screamed, her eyes becoming white orbs of energy as her horn flared up. I felt her spell fire off without full charge, just as the flames flared and exploded. There was no flash of memories, or even a pleasant tunnel. Just momentary pressure. Then nothing.